That would kill my phone.
Mine's still alive. Okay, we're live on YouTube. Hi, YouTube.
You know, they advertise all these water-resistant phones, but nobody seems to advertise cake batter-resistant phones.
That should be my $1 million idea.
It's brilliant.
Hi, Instagram.
Oh, hey, we are live, aren't we?
We are live talking about cake batter.
Wow.
We're live on Facebook. Hello, Facebook.
It's because we are the home of professional podcasting.
This is blocking your face, I feel.
That seems like an advantage. That's probably decent.
All right.
Somewhere in there.
We're good. Hello, everyone.
I feel super short in this chair.
Do you want to switch?
It's the same chair I'm always in. I just looked up and I'm like 6 inches short.
Am I taller?
You are. You're so tall.
I mean, did the chair get taller, not me? I've been trying to get taller for 15 years. It ain't gonna happen. I was the tallest person.
Your WNBA career.
Stopped, and everybody else.
You know, Emma was a little like that. She was, you know, I was just looking on the screensaver on my computer. I get the pictures that come up and stuff. So we'll see some of these gymnastics pictures, and she's taller than everybody.
Braces, and I only wore it at night.
Emma was getting very frustrated with her retainers, and I'm like, well, talk to Stacy because she had a really good time with hers. So
I just didn't wear my retainers, which is probably why my teeth have kind of gone wonky again. But then, because the clear ones are like really on each individual tooth,
okay, and
they're very uncomfortable. Welcome to Orthodontic Talk with Rich and Stacy.
We're having a good time.
Let's talk about.
Well, did they do their job? Is the question.
Oh, yes, they did.
So they completed the mission.
And then I didn't do my job, so I didn't complete.
Which is an important principle, because if everybody doesn't do their job, then the job doesn't get done.
It's correct. You don't have there a lot of fun. Because that would be the
group projects.
It's false.
And the thing that makes group projects important and necessary is that in life, whether we're talking about the workplace or the family or the church, the reality is we have to work together. We have to work in teams, and we have to learn how to do that well. What makes it extra frustrating, both in school and in life, is that more often than not, we don't do that particularly well. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a small group of people carry the load. That's not how the Lord intends it with the church. Never has been. So whether we're talking about the church today, the church in the New Testament, or even pre-church, looking at how God interacted with his people back in Genesis, even before Israel, God always deals with his people both individually and collectively. So he deals with his people as a people. He deals with us as groups, as family groups, as nations, but he never does that apart from dealing with us individually as well. I was just this morning in my quiet time was walking and listening to the book of Joshua, and they're talking about the story of Achan's sin as they had just sacked Jericho, and it was awesome the way God made all this happen. Everything was just the covenant, failed to keep the promise to God to destroy everything and consecrate everything to God. And this man named Achan kept some of the goods for himself. And later on, when he's confessing, he's like, yeah, I saw this awesome robe and this shiny stuff, and so I kept it. And it brought the town of Ai. They're like, oh, these people are small. There's not much to them. Don't take the whole army up. Just take 2,000 or 3,000 people. We'll go and get this done. Bada bing, bada boom, we're home, right? They go there, and they end up retreating and running away. And in their minds of how this plays out, they get slaughtered. They lost 36 people, which doesn't sound like a slaughter by comparison to what you're thinking of. But they're not used to losing at all. I mean, all they're doing under Joshua throughout pretty much the entire book, this is like the only exception in the entire book of Joshua. They just win. All they do is win, no matter what. So as they're going through this,
that was too recent of a reference.
Yeah, there's just nobody that's paying attention to our podcast that cares. But anyway, God is doing all of this stuff, and the whole focus that God is putting in front of them is, this isn't about you. This is about your faithfulness to me. And so as we are walking through this together, I will take these people. I will do all the work, except when they go to Ai. And they go up there and they're like, what happened? And Joshua's tripping. He's like, Lord, why did you even bother bringing us out of Egypt if we're going to fail like this? What's going on? And the Lord points out the sin. But what we see is God dealing with the nation and with the individual. The individual's sin, if I can say this, hurt the team. By not doing what he was supposed to do, it hurt the team. And so they end up purging the camp of that sin by purging the nation of that person. So God gives very specific instructions on how to handle that. Here in Acts chapter 14, now that we're, 25 minutes into the podcast, 6 minutes in. So we're
Not that bad.
It's way better than usual. I mean, my goodness.
We're actually getting to the point.
I'm kind of impressed. But as we see Acts chapter 14, it's coming full circle on Paul's first missionary journey. And it's really, we call it Paul's first missionary journey because in hindsight, we can look at it and see that Paul's kind of center stage, Acts, the latter half, it's more than half, but it's really not his missionary journey. It's God working through the church. And so the church at Antioch send Barnabas, who is ostensibly their leader. He's the senior guy from Jerusalem who comes down, puts together this leadership team with all these, whether he actually actively did that or not, we don't know. But he appears to be among the experienced senior leaders trusted by the leaders in Jerusalem. Goes to Antioch, establishes, sound teaching and good doctrine there. They have this leadership team. They have gifted people, evangelists and prophets and teachers. And among them are Barnabas, who appears to be prominent among them, and Saul, who appears to be not so prominent because he's the new guy in a lot of ways. And the Holy Spirit, in the midst of their worshiping and their fasting at the beginning of chapter 13, says, set these two apart. I've got to work for them. I have a mission for Saul and Barnabas. So they pray some more, they fast some more, they give them this benediction as they lay hands on them and commission them and send them out. Because it's not up to Saul and Barnabas. It's not their job. It's the troops back home, funding it, sending them, praying for them, doing all of the supporting roles that go along with it, or the whole thing doesn't happen. So then in chapter 14, which is what we focused on Sunday, we see them in the last leg of this. They're in Iconium and they're having great success, and then they're not, and they go from there to Lystra and they have great success, and then they don't, and then they go to Derbe and they have great success. And it doesn't tell us that they don't, but they, who knows what's going on. But when they do that, they circle back through these cities, go back to the places where they had just been persecuted, where Saul was beaten and stoned and left for dead. They go back to these places to support the churches that they've established there, to establish leaders, to appoint elders there, to make sure that they're. It's easy for us to look at that, and some folks from various backgrounds have seen that and said, well, that's kind of our earning our way in, and we have to pay the price. We have to pay our dues, so to speak, and all that kind of stuff, which is not the biblical picture at all. It's not saying that our means of getting to heaven is that we have to go through these hardships. And the more you suffer, the more reward you get. And there may be some principles that go along with that, but that's not the point of what he's saying. What he's saying is, look at what just happened to us. We know that this is true. Everything Paul has ever said says you get to heaven the same way Jesus said, by trusting in him. He's the way, the truth, the life. Paul later says that you're saved by grace through faith, not of works. So there's no part of this that is you earn points with God or merit that gets you into the kingdom of heaven by your suffering, even by martyrdom. That's something that we make up later on. That's not the Bible. But it is inevitable. Jesus made it really clear, in this world, you're going to have trouble. If they hated me, they're going to hate you. If they don't hate you, you might want to wonder about whether you actually belong to me.
Right.
So a servant's not above his master, so expect to be treated the way they treated me. And that whole idea goes into what Paul is going back and telling the churches. Look, it's good that you have knowledge. It's good that you have belief, but let me give you some preparation here. Let me prepare you for what's ahead. Going to see, and it's going to be rough. So buckle up, buckaroo, and get your helmet on, because you're going to have a rough ride here. And that's awesome. And we see over and over again with all this persecution, the disciples rejoice. The church rejoices. We continue to see this joy in suffering. And I think one of the reasons, this is a little sidebar, I guess, but one of the reasons that I think that the American church in particular, I can't speak to other places, I'm not there, but I think one of the reasons, because this happened back in the book of Jeremiah, but this idea that God wants you happy, and if you follow God, you'll always have everything go your way, and if you have enough faith, you won't get COVID-19, and your job will always prosper.
You'll have success.
Right. Your kids will turn out perfect. Your marriage will turn out perfect. You'll have white and shiny teeth, and your hair will never frizz out in the humidity or fall out in your old age.
Were you talking about me? With the frizziness. It's something I struggle with.
Does your hair frizz out in humidity?
It does, majorly.
I wouldn't have expected that with your hair being as straight as it is.
I straighten it.
I did not know that. How about that?
It's naturally kind of wavy.
I've never seen it not straightened, so I guess I never thought.
It's from my emo days in high school. I can't not straighten it.
Well, we've completely gotten off topic now, but anyway, that tour back through that Paul takes is specifically because this is not a solo mission. It's not just let's go evangelize. We're going to share the gospel and then run away. And I think far too often we have been guilty of that throughout the centuries, where we'll come in and convert and then quit. We go back and, hey, we did our job.
Right.
You're in the door. You're great. But that's like, getting married, saying I do, and having no effort put into developing a marriage.
Well, I think that especially, I'm disposable. And I think more people might be getting married because of that, because it's so easy to get a divorce. It's not, but
as a divorce
woman, right. But theoretically,
you can say that comfortably.
But if you have no children or whatever, then it's pretty easy to get a divorce. So then you see people with 2, 3, 4, 5 marriages, because it's just so easy to go through the process of getting married and thinking, oh, this just doesn't work out, I can just get a divorce. No big deal. And
it's funny because when you say that, we've done that with everything.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So marriage is easy.
Right.
Not getting married is easy.
Right.
So there's no social pressure to do really much of anything.
Right.
You can shack up, live together outside of God's will, and pretend to be married without being married.
Same thing with careers. I just did an article. I wrote an article today that said the average person changes careers like 12 times now in their life, and I'm like, I'm not that there's anything unhappy or that there's a problem with switching careers.
No,
but it just speaks, I think, to the underlying current there is everything is, if I'm not happy, I'm going to change it immediately. I'm happy here.
Writing it out.
Right. I'm not saying you should ride out a job that you're being treated horrible or whatever, but it just seems to fit with that mindset that if I'm not happy right now, it needs to change instantly.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're on accumulating, and the thing of it is, they didn't do anything super flashy. Right. It's not like they went out and made. Of course he did. Who doesn't? Right. But slow and steady wins the race.
I think about my grandfather. He worked in a foundry, and he'd come home, black as coal there, his whole life. He got a pension so he could retire, and he stayed this course. And I'm sure he did not want to come home looking like that every night, or being in a foundry like that.
Obviously, circumstances change. So,
right.
There are a lot of folks in that industry over the years.
So probably a generational thing.
Things change. So, now that we're in the information age, if you were in manufacturing, maybe your job went away. There's just a lot of shifts that take place. So there are always reasons to or not to change. But what we're seeing in so many ways is if it's hard, we don't stick with it. Right. As a coach, I see that in sports all the time. I had a coach once tell me, boy, if we had more kids, we'd discipline that boy. No, you wouldn't. The reality is, if you don't stick with your standards, you don't stick with your standards. It's pretty simple. So we go soft on people. Oh, man, I was just talking to somebody yesterday who they they own their own business. I said, I'm probably way too soft on my employees, much more than I would have been, but people can't handle it anymore.
Right.
You can't tell somebody they're doing something wrong.
That's just it. Because
without
if
them
you do,
freaking out,
they'll
they're going to
quit.
Right.
And still change careers 12 times.
And we do that in the church as
Right,
well. We
right.
want the benefits of Christ
Right.
without actually walking the path. We don't, we don't get saved by our works,
Well,
but we don't get saved to sit on the couch.
I know you've been criticized for, preaching fire and brimstone or whatever.
Mm.
And I think a lot of churches are kind of turning away from that. I don't even like to use the words fire and brimstone because it makes you feel, it puts a certain image in
Sure.
your mind. But there's a
Well,
difference.
if you talk to people from another generation, they might think I'm liberal with it.
Well, right. So there's you have to tell the truth.
I don't often get accused of being liberal.
Right.
To be able to connect the reality of God to the realities of life. We live where we live, in the time we live, in the setting we live. We don't get to change that, on a grand scale. So there are things that we can do to influence that. There are things we can do to impact those things. But the bottom line is God's truth is timeless. It doesn't change. God doesn't change.
Right. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. My truth, my reality.
Right.
That's not the case. Right.
What do you want them to see in this, and how do you want them to respond to that? And then we can draw from that principle in, middle America, in a church it's out of season. Well, guess what? You better get them picked. You better figure out a way to be ready. Same thing happens in sharing our faith. We must be ready always,
Mm-hmm.
even when it's not expected, to be able to share the reason that we have hope and peace. What is it that makes a difference? And then on a global scale as well. So we talk to and I think in our consumer culture, in our consumer churches, I just heard Tony Evans say in a sermon that most people attend church selfish, not church service.
Mm.
That our idea is I'm going to go get something from this
right.
rather than what am I giving to this. And when we're talking about global missions, I fear that far too often we as the church think of that as something that those people do. That missionary, they're going to go, boy, I'm sure excited about them and proud of them. But that's not the picture that we see here. The picture is we, the local church, have this global mission. I have the same mission that Suzanne, our missionary to Hungary, Keith and Heather, our missionaries to Costa Rica, and the reservation it's needed Antioch. Pray for them. They send their blessing with them. They're mentally and emotionally invested in these people, mm-hmm. which means that, as we see over and over again in the book of Acts, if I'm mentally and emotionally, spiritually invested in these people, then I am automatically, it follows that I will be financially and fiscally invested in these people.
Right.
If I'm not, then I'm not really that emotionally connected with them. I don't have the affection for them. I don't have the priority for that aspect of the mission. Because when you care about something, by default, you always put your money where your mouth is. Mm-hmm. If not, you don't really believe in that. That's why Jesus said, where your heart is, your treasure will be. And that, or where your treasure is, your heart will be. It goes both ways. Right. Whatever I'm invested in, I'm going to care about. Whatever I care about, I'm going to be invested in. So we see that dynamic in the church as well. And so we need to recognize that every single person, every member of the church needs to be involved in mission. Some people can give a lot of money to that, right. And then you should. Some people can give a little money to that, and then you should. Some people are called to actually go and do it. Now, the reality is there are fewer of the goers mm-hmm. than there are of the senders, but we always need more goers. And that's what Jesus said. It was our memory verse for the week. We were looking at Luke 10:2. Check on my sheet. Had a couple of different memory verses that we were wrestling with. And in Luke 10:2, he tells the disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. So most of these people that he's talking to are going to be goers. Some of them are going to be senders, But one way or another, they need to be praying, asking, Lord, send me, send us, send workers, because they're white with harvest, as the King James would say. They're ready, they're ripe to be brought in. And so when we look at this world that's falling apart, going to hell in a handbasket, literally going to hell, figuratively with a handbasket, as we see this stuff going on, all of the social justice stuff in the world is not keeping one person out of hell.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we don't work for justice. That's what we do in the name of the Lord. That's what we're called to. We need to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. And if we're going to reflect the character of Jesus, then we need to demonstrate in physical, material ways the spiritual realities of God's compassion. And that's important. But none of that's going to change anybody's eternal destiny. So we can protest about racial injustice. We can, get involved in politics. We can stand for all the right, true, good things. But if we're not sharing the gospel, the actual gospel, that you're dead in sin and you have zero hope, period, apart from Jesus Christ taking that sin on himself, dying in your place and mine to appease the wrath, the righteous wrath of a holy God, rising from the dead with us in tow, so that we who are his by faith, children of promise, can become children of God. If we don't have that message, then everything else is for naught.
Right.
Because eventually you die. And then what? So this short period of not participating in the global mission of the church, that we're not participating in the one thing that matters and will last for eternity.
We'll end there so we don't go too far over time like we usually do. Do you have any closing thoughts? You do, but I'm not going to let you.
Well played.
Thank you guys for listening. If you want to send us an email, or if you have any questions, as usual, somethingreal@reallifeonline.org.com. .org? .org. It's still .org. Thank you guys for listening. And
Panic for a minute.
I did. I didn't want to give misinformation. Thanks again. See you later.